Hello guys, and welcome back to Leah's Lifestyle. We're at it again with another Berkshire Hathaway letter to shareholders, and today we are reading the 1987. So, without further ado, let's just jump right into it. To the shareholders of Berkshire Hathaway Inc., our gain in net worth during 1987 was $464 million, or 19.5%. Over the last 23 years, that is, since present management took over, our per-share book value has grown from $19.46 to $2,477.47, or at a rate of 23.1% compounded annually. What counts, of course, is the rate of gain in per-share business value, not book value. In many cases, a corporation's book value and business value are almost totally unrelated. For example, just before they went bankrupt, LTV and Baldwin United Publishing year-end audits showing their book value to be $652 million and $397 million, respectively. Conversely, Bale Ridge Oil was sold to Shell in 1979 for $3.6 billion, although its book value was only $177 million. At Berkshire, however, the two valuations have tracked rather closely, with the growth rate in business value over the last decade moderately outpacing the growth rate in book value. This good news continues in 1987. Our premium of business value to book value has widened for two simple reasons. We own some remarkable businesses, and they are run by even more remarkable managers. You have a right to question that second assertion. After all, CEOs seldom tell their shareholders that they have assembled a bunch of turkeys to run things. Their reluctance to do so makes for some strange annual reports. Oftentimes, in his shareholders' letters, a CEO will go on for pages detailing corporate performance that is woefully inadequate. He will nothing less end with a warm paragraph describing his managerial comrades as our most precious assets. Such comments sometimes make you wonder what the other assets can possibly be. At Berkshire, however, my appraisal of our operating managers is, if anything, understated. To understand why, first take a look at page 7, where we show the earnings on a historical cost accounting basis of our 7 largest non-financial units: Buffalo News, Fitchmeyer, Kirby, Nebraska Furniture Mart, Scott Fritz, Manufacturing Group, See's Candies, and World Books. In 1987, these 7 businesses units had combined operation earnings before interest and taxes of $180 million. By itself, this figure says nothing about economic performance. To evaluate that, we must know how much total capital, debt, and equity was needed to produce these earnings. Debt plays an insufficient role at our 7 units. Their net interest expense in 1987 was only $2 million. Thus, pre-tax earnings on the equity capital employed by these businesses amounted to $178 million. And this equity, again on historical cost basis, was only $175 million. If these 7 business units had operated as a single company rather than 1987, after-tax earnings would have been approximately $100 million, a return of about 57% on equity capital. You'll seldom see such a percentage anywhere, let alone at large. Diversified companies with normal leverage. Here's a benchmark. In its 1988 Investor Guide issue, Fortune reported that among the 500 target industrial companies and 500 largest service companies, only 6 had averaged a return on equity of over 30% during the previous decade. The best performers among the 100 was Commerce Clearinghouse at 40.2%. Of course, The returns that Berkshire earns from these 7 units are not as high as their underlying return basis returns because in aggregate we bought the businesses at a substantial premium to underlying equity capital. Overall, these operations are carried on our books at about $222 million above the historical accounting values of the underlying assets. However, the managers of the unit should be judged by the returns they achieved on the underlying assets. What we pay for a business does not affect the amount of capital its manager has to work with. If, to become a shareholder and part owner of the Commerce Clearinghouse, you pay, say, 6 times book value, that does not change CCH's return on equity. 3 important inferences can be drawn from the figure I have cited. First, the current business value of these 7 units is far above their historical book value and also far above the value at which they are carried on Berkshire's balance sheet. Second, because so little capital is required to run these businesses, they can grow while concurrently making almost all of their earnings available for development in new opportunities. Third, these businesses are run by truly extraordinary managers. The Blumkins, the Hellmans, Chuck Huggins, Stan Lipsey, and Ralph Skye are meld unusually talented energy and character to achieve exceptional financial results. For good reason, we have very high expectations when we joined with these managers. In every case, however, our experience has greatly exceeded those expectations. We have received far more than we deserve, but we are willing to accept such inadequacies. We subscribe to the view Jack Benny expressed upon receiving an acting award. Quote, "I don't deserve this, but then I have arthritis and I don't deserve that either." End quote. Beyond the Satin 7, we have our other major unit, insurance, which I believe also has a business value well above the net assets employed in it. However, appraising the business value of a property casualty insurance company is a decidedly imprecise process. The industry is volatile. Reporting earnings often are seriously inaccurate, and recent changes in the tax code will severely hurt future profitability. Despite these problems, we like the business and it will most certainly remain our largest operation. Under Mike Goldberg's management, the insurance business should treat us well over time. With managers like ours, our partner, Charlie Munger, and I have little to do with operations. In fact, it is probably fair to say that if we did more, less would be accomplished. We have no more corporate meetings, no corporate budgets, and no performance reviews. Though our managers, of course, oftentimes find such procedures useful at their operating units, after all, what can we tell the Blumkins about home furnishings, or the Heldams about uniforms? Our major contribution to the operation of our subsidiaries is applause, but it is not the indiscriminate applause of a Pollyanna. Rather, it is the informed applause based upon the 2 long careers we have spent intensely observing business performance and managerial behavior. Charlie and I have seen so much of the ordinary in businesses that we can truly appreciate a virtuous performance. Only one response to the 1987 performance of our operating managers is appropriate: sustained, defining applause. Source of reporting earnings. The table in the following page shows the major sources of Berkshire's reported earnings. In the table, amortization of goodwill and other major purchase prices accounting adjustments are not charged against the specific business to which they apply, but instead are aggregated and shown separately. In effect, these procedures present the earnings of our businesses as they would have been reported had we not purchased them. In appendixes to my letter in the 1983 and 1986 annual reports, I explained why this form of presentation seems to us to be more useful to investors and managers than the standard GAAP presentation, which makes purchase price adjustment on a business by business basis. The total net earnings we show in the table are of course, identical to the GAAP figures in our audited financial statements. In the business segment data on page 36 to 38, and in the management discussion sections on page 40 to 44, you will find such additional information about our businesses. In these sections, you will also find our segment earnings reported on a GAAP basis. I urge you to read that material, as well as Charlie Munger's letter to Westco shareholders, describing the various businesses of that subsidiary, which starts on page 45. Okay, and then just like normal when we read this, it says 00 is omitted, pre-tax, and after-tax, or shares of net earnings after-tax, the year of the year prior, the year of the year prior, all of the names, and then the prices, but we're just going to do the total earnings. So pre-tax earnings, current year of 87, 308,238 of the prior year 86, 412,099 after tax. Current year 87, 234,552, 86 after tax. Prior year 282,361. Gypsy Rose Lee announced one of her later birthdays, quote, "I have everything I had last year. It's just that it's all 2 inches lower," end quote. As the table shows, during 1987, almost all of our business aged in a more upbeat way. There's not a lot new to report about these businesses, and that's good, not bad. Severe changes and exceptional returns usually don't mix. Most investors, of course, believe as if just the opposite were true. That is, they usually confer the highest price earning ratios on exotic sounding businesses that hold out to the promises of the feverish change. That prospect lets investors fantasize about future profitability rather than face today's business realities. For such investors/dreamers, any blind date is preferable to one with a girl next door, no matter how desirable she may be. Experience, however, indicates that the best business returns are usually achieved by companies that are doing something quite similar today to what they were doing 5 or 10 years ago. That is no argument for managerial complacency. Businesses always have opportunities to improve services, product lines, manufacturing techniques, and the like. And obviously, these opportunities should be seized. But a business that consistently encounters major changes also encounters many chances for major error. Furthermore, economic terrain that is forever shifting violently is ground on which it is difficult to build a fortress-like business franchise. Such a franchise is usually the key to sustained high returns. The fortune study I mentioned earlier supports our view. Only 25 of the 1,000 companies met 2 tests of economic excellence, on average return on equity of over 20% in the 10 years, 1977 through 1986, and no year worse than 15%. These businesses' superstars were also stock market superstars. During the decade, 24 of the 25 outperformed the S&P 500. The fortune champs may surprise you in 2 respects. First, most use very little leverage compared to their interest-paying capacity. Really, good businesses usually don't need to borrow. Second, except for one company that is quote-unquote high-tech and several others that manufacture ethical drugs, the companies are in businesses that, on balance, seem rather mundane. Most sell non-sexy products or services in much the same manner as they did 10 years ago, though in large quantities now, or at higher prices, or both. The record of these 25 companies confirms that making the most of an already strong business franchise or concentrating on a single winning business theme is what usually produces exceptional economics. Berkshire's experience has been similar. Our managers have produced extraordinary results by doing rather ordinary things, but doing them exceptionally well. Our managers protect their franchises. They control costs, They search for new products and markets that build on their existing strengths, and they don't get diverted. They work exceptionally hard on the detail of their businesses, and it shows. Here's an update. Agatha Christine, whose husband was an archaeologist, said that was the perfect profession for one's spouse. Quote, "The older you become, the more interested they are in you." End quote. It is students of business management, not archaeologists, who should be interested in Mrs. B. Rose Blumkin, the 94-year-old chairman of Nebraska Furniture Mart. 50 years ago, Mrs. B started the business with $500, and today NFM is far and away the largest home furnishing store in the country. Mrs. B continues to work 7 days a week at the job from opening of each business day until the close. She buys and sells, she manages, and she runs rings around the competition. It's clear to me that she's gathering speed and may well reach her full potential in another 5 or 10 years. Therefore, I persuaded the board to scrap our mandatory retirement at 100 policy, and it's about time. With every passing year, the policy has seemed sillier to me. Net sales of NFM were $142.6 billion in 1987, up 8% from 1986. There's nothing like this store in the country, and there's nothing like the family Mrs. B has produced to carry on. Her son Louis and his 3 boys, Ron, Irv, and Steve, possess the business instincts, integrity, and drive of Mrs. B. They work as a team, and strong as each is individually, the whole is far greater than the sum of the parts. The superb job done by by Blumkin's family benefits us as owners, but even more dramatically benefits NFM's customers. They saved about $30 million in 1987 by buying from NFM. In other words, the goods they bought would have cost them that much more if purchased elsewhere. You'll enjoy an anonymous letter I received last August. Quote, "Sorry to see Berkshire profits fall in the second quarter. One way you may gain back part of your lost check the pricing at the Furniture Mart. You will find that they are leaving 10% to 20% on the table. This additional profit on 140 million of sales is 28 million. Not small change in anyone's pocket. Check out other furnitures, carpet, appliances, and TV dealers. Your raising prices to a reasonable profit will help. Thank you. Signed, a competitor." End quote. NFM will continue to grow and prosper by following Mrs. B's maximum, quote, "sell cheap and tell the truth," end quote. Among dominant papers of its size or larger, the Buffalo News continues to be the national leader in 2 important ways. One, its weekday and Sunday penetration rate, the percentage of households in the paper's primary market area that purchase it, and 2, its quote-unquote new holes percentage, the portion of the paper devoted to news. It may not be coincidence that one newspaper leads in both categories. An exceptionally quote-unquote news-rich product makes for broad audience appeal, which in turn leads to high penetration. Of course, quantity must be matched by quality. This not only means good reporting and good writing, it means freshness and relevance to be indispensable. A paper must promptly tell its readers many things they want to know but won't otherwise learn until much later, if ever. At the News, we put out 7 fresh edits every 24 hours, each one extensively changed in content. Here's a small example that may surprise you. We redo the obituary page in every edition of the News, or 7 times a day. Any obituary added runs through the next 6 editions until the publishing cycle has been completed. It's vital, of course, for a newspaper to cover national and international news well in depth, but it is also vital for it to do what only a local newspaper can, promptly and extensively chronicle the personally important, otherwise unreported, details of community life. Doing this job well requires a very broad range of news, and that means lots of space, intelligently used. Our news holes was about 50% in 1987, just as it has been year after year. If we were to cut it to a more typical 40%, we would save approximately $4 million annually on newsprint costs. That interests us not at all, and it won't interest us even if, for one reason or another, our profit margins should significantly shrink. Charlie and I do not believe in flexible operating budgets, as in, quote-unquote, non-direct expenses can be X if reviews are Y, but must be reduced if revenues are Y minus 5%. Should we really cut our news holes at the Buffalo News or the quality of product and services at Seas simply because profits are down during a given year or quarter? Or, conversely, should we add a staff economist, a corporate strategist, a institutional advertising campaign, or something else that does Berkshire no good simply because the money currently is rolling in? That makes no sense to us. We neither understand the adding of unneeded people or activities because profits are booming, nor the cutting of essential people or activities because profitability is shrinking. That kind of yo-yo approach is neither businesslike nor humane. Our goal is to do what makes sense in Berkshire's customers and employees at all times, and never to add the unneeded. Quote, "But what about the corporate jet?" End quote. You rudely ask. Well, occasionally a man must rise above principle. Although the news revenues have grown only moderately since 1984, superb management by Stan Lipsey, its publisher, has produced excellent profit growth. For several years, I have incorrectly predicted that profit margins at the news would fall. This year, I will not let you down. Margins will, without question, shrink in 1988, and profit may fall as well. Skyrocketing newsprint costs will be the major cause. Freshmere Bros. Company is another of our family businesses, and, like the Blumpkins, what a family. 3 generations of Heldmans have, for decades, consistently built the sales and profits of this manufacturer and distributor of uniforms. In the year the Berkshire acquired its controlling interest in Freshmere, 1986, profits were a record. The Heldmans didn't slow down after that. Last year earnings increased substantially, and the outlook is good for 1988. There's nothing magic about the uniform business. The only magic is in the Heldmans. Bob, George, Gary, Roger, and Fred know the business inside and out, and they have fun running it. We are fortunate to be in partnership with them. Chuck Huggins continues to set new records at Seas, just as he has ever since we put him in charge on the day of our purchase some 16 years ago. In 1987, volume hit a new high as slightly under 25 million pounds. For the second year in a row, moreover, same-store sales measured in pounds were virtually unchanged. In case you were wondering, that represents improvement in each of the previous 6 years. Same-store sales have fallen. Although we had a particularly strong 1986 Christmas season, we racked up better store-for-store comparison in the 1987 Christmas season than at the other time of the year. Thus, the seasonal factors at Seas become even more extreme. In 1987, about 85% of our profits was earned during December. Candy stores are fun to visit, but most have not been fun for their owners. From what we can learn, practically no one besides Seas has made significant profits in recent years from the operation of candy shops. Clearly, Chuck's record at Seas is not due to a rising industry tide. Rather, it is a one-of-a-kind of performance. His achievement requires an excellent product, which we have, but it also requires genuine affection for the customer. Chuck is 100% customer orientated, and his attitude sets the tone for the rest of the See's organization. Here's an example of Chuck in action. At See's, we regularly add new pieces of candy to our mix and also cut a few to keep our product line at about 100 varieties. Last spring, we selected 14 items for elimination. 2, it turned out, were badly missed by our customers, who wasted no time in letting us know what they thought of our judgment. Quote, a pox on all in See's who's participated in the abominable decision. End quote. Quote, may your new truffles melt in transit. May they sour in people's mouths. May your costs go up and your profits go down. Quote. End quote. Quote, we are investigating the possibility of obtaining a mandatory injunction requiring you to supply. End quote. You get the picture. In all, we received many hundreds of letters. Chuck not only reintroduced the piece, he turned this miscue into an opportunity. Each person who had written got a complete and honest explanation in return, said Chuck's letter. Quote, fortunately, when I make poor decisions, good things often happen as a result. End quote. And with the letter went a specific gift certificate. See's increased prices only slightly in the last 2 years. In 1988, we had raised prices somewhat more, though still moderately. To date, sales have been weak, and it may be difficult for See's to improve its earnings this year. World Book. Kirby and the Scott Fitzer Manufacturing Group are all under the management of Ralph Sky. And what a lucky thing for us that they are. I told you last year that Scott Fitzer performance in 1986 had far exceeded the expectations that Charlie and I had at the time of our purchase. Results in 1987 were even better. Pre-tax earnings rose 10%, while average capital employment declined significantly. Ralph's mastery of the 19 businesses for which he is responsible is truly amazing, and he has also attracted some outstanding managers to run them. He would love to find a few additional units that could be put under Ralph's wing. The business of Scott Fitzer are too numerous to describe in detail. Let's just update you on one of our favorites. At the end of 1987, World Book introduced its most dramatically revised edition since 1962. The number of color photos was increased from 14,000 to 24,000. Over 6,000 articles were revised. 840 new contributors were added. Charlie and I recommended this product to you and your family as we do World Book's products for younger children, Childcraft, and Early World of Learning. In 1987, World Book unit sales in the United States increased for the 5th consecutive year. International sales and profits also grew substantially. The outlook is good for Scott Fitzer's operation in aggregate and for World Book in particular. Insurance operations. Shown below is an updated version of our usual table presenting key figures for the insurance industry. And we've gone over these ones before, so we'll just do current year and previous year. And it has yearly change premiums, stationary combined ratio after policy dividends, yearly change in incurred losses, inflation rate measured by GNP inflator. And remember that the stationary combined ratio after policy dividends, if it's above 105 or 100, it's a loss, which has been for the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. So, but it's recently gotten better because it got worse first. Okay, so 86, the numbers across the board are 22.2, 108, 13.5, and 2.6. For this year, 87, the estimate is 8.7, 104.7, 6.8, and 3. Source Best Insurance Management Reports. The combined ratio represents total insurance cost, losses incurred plus expenses compared to revenues from premiums. A ratio below 100 indicates an underwriting profit, and one above 100 indicates a loss. When the investment income that an insurer earns from holdings onto policyholders' funds, quote unquote, the float, is taken into account. a combined ratio in the 107 to 110 range typically produces an overall break-even result, exclusive of earnings on the funds provided by shareholders. The math of the insurance business, encapsulated by the table, is not very complicated. In years when the industry's annual gain in revenues, premiums, pokes along at 4% or 5%, underwriting losses are sure to amount. That is not because auto accidents, fires, windstorms, and the like are occurring more frequently, nor has it lately been the fault of general inflation. Today, social and judicial inflation are the major culprits. The cost of entering a courtroom has simply ballooned. Part of the jump in cost arises from skyrocketing verdicts, and part of the tendency of judges and juries to expand the coverage of insurance policies beyond the contemplated by the issuer when the policies were written. Seeing no let-up in either trend, we continue to believe that the industry's revenues must grow at about 10% annually for it to just hold its own in terms of profitability, even though general inflation may be running at a considerably lower rate. The strong revenue gains of 1985 and 87 almost guarantee the industry an excellent underwriting performance in 1987. And indeed, it was a banner year. But the news source, as the quarters rolled by, best estimates that year-over-year volume increases were 12.9%, 11.1%, 5.7%, and 5.6%. In 1988, the revenue gain is certain to be far below our 10% equilibrium figure. Clearly, the party is over. However, earnings will not immediately sink. A lag factor exists in this industry because most policies are written for a 1-year term. Higher or lower insurance price do not have their full impact on earnings until many months after they go into effect. Thus, to resume our metaphor, when the party ends and the bar is closed, you are allowed to finish your drink. If results are not hurt by major natural catastrophes, we predict a small climb for the industry's combined ratio in 1988, followed by several years of larger increases. The insurance industry is cursed with a set of dismal economic characteristics that make for a poor long-term outlook, hundreds of competitors, ease of entry, and a product that cannot be differentiated in any meaningful way. In such a commodity-like business, only a very low-cost operator or someone operating in a protected and usually small niche can sustain high profitability levels. When shortages exist, however, even commodity businesses flourish. The insurance industry enjoyed that kind of climate for a while, but it is now gone. One of the ironies of capitalism is that most managers in commodity insurance abhor shortages conditions, even though those are the only circumstances permitting them good returns. Whenever shortages appear, the typical manager simply can't wait to expand capacity and thereby plug the hole through which money is showering upon him. This is precisely what insurance managers did in 1985 and 87, confirming again Disraeli's observations, quote, "What we learn from history is that we do not learn from history," end quote. At Berkshire, we work to escape the industry commodity economics in 2 ways. First, we differentiate our product by our financial strength, which exceeds that of all others in the industry. This strength, however, is limited in its usefulness. It means nothing in the personal insurance field. The buyer of an auto or homeowner policy is going to get his claim paid even if his insurer fails, as many have. It often means nothing in the commercial insurance arena. When times are good, many major corporate purchasers of insurance and their brokers pay scant attention to the insurer's ability to perform under the more adverse conditions than many exist. Say 5 years later, when a complicated claim is finally resolved. Out of sight, out of mind, and later on, maybe out of pocket. Periodically, however, buyers remember Ben Franklin's observation that it is hard for an empty sack to stand upright and recognize their need to buy promises only from insurers that have enduring financial strength. It is then that we have a major competitive advantage. When a buyer really focuses on whether a $10 million claim can be easily paid by his insurer 5 or 10 years down the road, and when he takes it into account the possibility that poor underwriting conditions may have coincided with depressed financial markets and defaults by reinsurers, he will find only a few companies he can trust. Among those, Berkshire will lead the pack. Okay, we're going to pause there, and you will come back tomorrow to read part 2. And until then, guys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that bell icon so that way you know every single time when I post. Leave a comment down below. What do you think about this overview so far? The shortening. His little intro's so cute. I feel like they're starting to get about similar now. Yeah. And then until tomorrow. Bye.